Thank you, Angelica. Up from the dust. Be reading in the book of Daniel to start this morning. In Daniel, the 12th chapter, as Daniel wraps up his life's work of visions of the advancement of God's eternal plan. In Daniel chapter 12, verse 1, at that time Michael shall stand up, the great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that time. And at that time, your people, throughout the book of Daniel, there's reference to Daniel's people. Daniel's people are the Jews, by the way. In fact, when he saw his vision of 70 weeks, and we're not going to get into that, he said, this vision is for your people and your holy city, the Jews in Jerusalem. He says, it says there will be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that time. And at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone who is found written in the book. Again, God, let your grace and your word speak to us today. Now, when we speak of this time of trouble, Jesus will reference it in his discussion of the end time that we call the Olivet Discourse, and talk about this time of trouble that's never been before or after on the planet. And generally speaking, people believe and teach that this is what we call the Great Tribulation. And I have probably a little bit different than traditional view about that. And sometimes I catch some flack over it. But I will tell you this up front, that even though I may have a little bit different view than some people traditionally hold, when I step back to the big perspective and look at the big picture, for all intents and purposes, I would be in the camp, staunchly in the camp, of what people refer to as pre-tribulation rapture. I'm going to be gone when this stuff happens. You want to hang around, that's your business. But I'm out of here. But that's not really what I'm here to talk about today. So he says that there's a deliverance coming. A comprehensive, powerful deliverance. And that deliverance extends even beyond the physical life that I have right now. In Daniel 12:2, it says, and many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake. Some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting contempt. Those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the firmament, or the heavens. And those who turn many to righteousness like stars forever and ever. You know that one of the questions that may be raised, here he's talking about the resurrection. This is one of the times that the resurrection is in the Old Testament, in the book of Daniel. It says, many of those who sleep in the dust. Now, if you read that at first glance, many, that means maybe not everybody, but just many? But actually, that word many is one of those kind of words that has a broad application. We have English words that we can use a dozen different ways, and they will mean different things in different contexts. One of the ways this word is translated in the English Bible, among many others, it's translated enough, a large amount, multitudes. And one of the ways it's translated is multitudes, and we can paraphrase it like this. And it says, in the multitudes who sleep in the dust. It's not exclusive, it's just saying that everybody. Multitudes and multitudes are coming out of the grave. Is another way we could express that expression. And if we can establish that even further by looking at Jesus' words in the New Testament. Most assuredly I say to you, the hour is coming, and now is, when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God. And those who hear will live. For as the Father hath life in himself, so he has granted the Son to have life in himself. And has given him, that is the Son, authority to execute judgment also, because he is the Son of Man. Now, I don't want to preach this sermon either, but I will just briefly reference it. You know, we talk about that because Jesus took on himself humanity. It's one of the fundamental truths of Christianity. That Jesus took on himself humanity so that he could bear my sins in his human body. And he has the right to redeem me because he became like me, and became one of me, and lived among us, and bore his sins in my own body. But he also says he has the absolute right to judge us because he lived as one of us. He says he's given him authority to execute judgment also because he is the Son of Man. Because he has stepped down. Not only has he have the power and the authority to redeem me, he has the power and the authority to judge me. Because of his incarnation and resurrection. And he goes on in that passage in John 5:28, do not marvel at this. For the hour is coming in which all, A-L-L, all who are in the graves will hear his voice and come forth. Those who have done good to the resurrection of life, and those who have done evil to the resurrection of condemnation. So that's what he says in Daniel, that the multitudes will come out, some to the resurrection of righteousness and some to the resurrection of condemnation. He goes on in Daniel, the next verse in Daniel 12:4. But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. You know, there's a lot that we don't understand. In fact, here the word declares, God declares to Daniel, he said, you know, the real comprehension of the things that have been revealed through your visions and this prophetic word that we call the book of Daniel and its 12 chapters, the real understanding of this book is really not going to be open until the end of the age, to the end of time, till things are wrapping up. I am persuaded that we live in an age when many of these things that were once hidden are now available and coming online. One of the ways that my dad used to illustrate this, because I remember when this happened. Everybody had to have one of them cameras that spit out the film and you watched it develop. And Polaroid cameras. And it'd be kind of a blank piece of film and it would start to little by little come into focus. He said prophecy is like that. As we get closer to the end, it comes more and more into focus. And we're getting to a place where we can start to see a little bit of what the picture is going to look like. It's not so much a blank frame anymore. We're starting to see it develop. It's not fully there yet, but we're starting to really see what the picture kind of looks like. Because we're living in an age when things are getting unsealed, as it were. And the next part of that verse, verse 4, says, and many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. And I want to try to keep this short and condensed and still convey what I want to convey. We live in a unique time in history, which I've often mentioned. There is no historical precedent for the world that we live in. You know, you can go back in history and you know, there's been pestilence and wars and upheavals and rise and fall of empires, but there's kind of historical precedents you can look at in every circumstance. And even though a lot of these things have not changed, there's never been a time in the history of the human race that we have the abilities and technologies and the smallness of the world that we live in. You know, this really accelerated even in the turn of the century. I didn't refresh my memory what year Einstein came up with his theory of relativity. I think it's somewhere in 1910, 12, 13, 15, I can't remember. Somewhere in there. In other words, it's in the 1900s, early 1900s, that moved us into the nuclear age. Moved us into a new world that we live in. And technology was kind of the very most antiquated concept of what a computer might be started in the late 1800s. But computers really didn't start to come online to the general public till probably the late 80s, so they really got compute to be what we would think of as computers today. Some of the earliest computers weighed a few tons, as big as this whole sanctuary. And they couldn't even, the people that built those couldn't even in their wildest imagination figure that I carry around a computer in my pocket more powerful than that thing ever dared to be, called a cell phone. But we're living in a time now where everything happens in real time, in a small world, and the world has become a small community. People move around quite freely and frequently, and knowledge has exploded. China is expanding its network of satellites with the goal of blanketing the globe with internet access that they control. They are investing literally billions and billions and billions of dollars in this project to build internet and cell phone infrastructure around the globe. They're investing heavily in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. They want to ensure that people have access to their system, which will in turn give China access to the people and businesses that use that system. And the scope of this, I cannot do it justice to explain how deeply invested and how motivated China is to do this. Some of the most remote places on the world today now have full 5G cell phone access because China has brought it to them. And why do they do that? Because we are living in an age where everything that happens in the world happens online. Banking, business, education, and in the very near future, medicine. It's already getting there, so it's starting. Everything happens online. And whoever has control of those internet platforms has access to all that information directly without don't even have to hack it, it's built in. They want it. Everything, world commerce, world banking, world finance, everything happens online. Everything. But China's not the only one. Elon Musk is building and expanding his Starlink network of satellites for the same reason. Amazon, Jeff Bezos, is working on a project they call the Kuiper project. It's an initiative to increase global broadband access through a constellation of 3,236 satellites in low Earth orbit. That's Bezos' project. For the same reason. We want to provide access to all of this global system, which we control. If it's my network, I control it. I have access to its information. Now, the thing is, if we add to that, to this expansion of the internet age, the introduction of AI, artificial intelligence, we're now on the threshold, just like when those early computers right now seem kind of almost laughable. Their bulk, their size, their limited capacity. That we're in a place now where we're just in the beginning of a whole new generation that's going to change the face of the world in ways you cannot even imagine. With the introduction of, and we're on the threshold of quantum computing, and we're on the threshold of supercomputers that, coupled with AI, will do things beyond what your wildest dreams. I can't even begin to imagine all the potential that is coming. And it won't be all for good. It's not always, it potentially could do a lot of good, but it can potentially and will do a lot of bad. Because with this artificial intelligence, the new age of knowledge and technology is here. It is still in its infancy. Your wildest imagination cannot grasp where this new age will take the world if Jesus doesn't come soon. They've already used AI to demonstrate that reading people's minds is achievable. Wow. This is not imaginary. There's several projects around the world and leading universities that have demonstrated AI's ability, and it's pretty complex. It's kind of like those first computers that took up a whole building. In a few years, they'll be able to do it with a device the size of your cell phone. Well, even one scientist I was watching a documentary on the development of mind reading. They said they'll be able to tell what you're thinking about a project with a little scanner on the shelf in the store. They can tell how you're reacting to their price, to the product. Right now, it's this giant bulky thing that have to have an MRI of your brain and hook it up to be interpreted by a artificial intelligence supercomputer and have to do all this programming. But they're actually printing out pictures of what your brain. They showed they've done dozens of experiments, all of them demonstrably true. One of the things they did, they showed people a series of pictures, and without programming the AI, they did that independently. They let them look at the pictures. Then they scanned their brain with the computer and the AI, and the AI is able to print out pictures of what they saw accurately. And it's just the tip of the iceberg. It's going to get a lot more sophisticated. This is just getting started. It's just being born. And just what I'm trying to say is, as surely as the technology advanced from those early attempts at computing to what we have today, that's going to very quickly happen now. Because the acceleration of technology and knowledge keeps growing exponentially. The speed by which things develop now is thousands of times faster than it was when we first started. Because this technology generates this ability to go faster as we learn. Even AI can start helping them write their own programs now and develop their own technology. When we think about AI, artificial intelligence, computing power, it will change medicine. Just the other day, they did here a few weeks ago, I read an article where a group of researchers who were trying to develop new medical treatments for incurable diseases were starting to use AI to run all these calculations and of different combinations of drug and evaluate them. They can evaluate millions and millions of combinations very quickly, and to develop new drugs. So some of the researchers that were doing this, trying to develop medicine, oh, hey, let's try a little experiment. let's see what we could do if we run this program to develop biological weapons. You see, that same technology that can go through and develop new medical treatments at the same time, they could use that, and probably will, not probably, they will use it to develop some really nasty stuff, biological and chemical weapons. That research should be accelerated exponentially. You know, genetic engineering, I don't even go there, but man's going to seek to evolve himself. We've already did some pretty mind-boggling things with genetic engineering, but AI will accelerate that. I already mentioned the development of biological and chemical weapons. The advancement in weaponry of every kind for warfare. You know, that's the other thing that's unique to our age. Man's always been at war, but he's never had the capability for warfare that we have in this time. But just last but not least, and I think most importantly, that AI will do, the complete and absolute loss of privacy. There is absolutely no place, zero place to hide. Everything about you is integrated and monitored. Your medical history, financial history, shopping history, political history, social media history, educational history, career history, entertainment history. That means they know what you watch on TV and what shows you like, what books you read. There is nothing about you. But what happens then is now AI can conglomerate all of that information about you. And what they can understand you in ways your mama don't even know. They know what makes you tick. And the thing is there's no living off the grid anymore. They know what you buy at the grocery store. They know what kind of food you like. They know everything there is about you in real time. And beyond that, and I know we've all probably had this experience one way or the other. I can't even remember now exactly what I was talking about. I just remember I was stunned. I know this, but yeah, it just kind of really struck home. I was in the car with Dell. We were discussing something in the car. And I wasn't even particularly interested. I'm not going to be buying it. I'm not interested in it really. I remember how it came up. But the rest of the day, every time I opened my internet, my Yahoo Mail or social media of any kind, opened up my browser on my internet, there were ads for that item everywhere I looked. And it's not something that would normally crop up. It wasn't even something I would normally be involved with. It's something I hadn't shopped for. It wasn't something that I would ever looked at on the internet, but I said it. And now it's popping up everywhere. They know where you're at. They know what you're doing. I'm just saying that we're living in a time when knowledge is increasing. This is end time stuff. This is the end of the age stuff. And then the other thing about AI, and we don't have time to get into it too much depth. This is my Yahoo newsfeed yesterday. So I just printed a little. This is finance on the finance page of Yahoo. A controversial podcaster, Joe Rogan, has issued a warning about artificial intelligence after a fake but very realistic version of his popular podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience, was published online. In other words, artificial intelligence, this program, ChatGPT, produced a complete podcast with him and his guest. It's very real to look at, but completely fake. And again, this is just the tip of the iceberg. We will no longer be able to depend on anything we see. In fact, it's already there. What you see on TV, the internet, or anywhere else, even if it's stuff you think should be true, don't buy it. Because it probably ain't. And I will tell you, it's coming at you from both directions. Because both sides, right and left, center, upside down, and backwards, are all going to be propagating misinformation. You know, this has often been called the information age. It's not. It's the misinformation age. And actually, this one here was done in the open because it was prefaced with a warning that this is not real. This is generated by artificial intelligence as an experiment. So they told them up front it's fake. But, you know, like he said, this is so real. If it wasn't for that little writer, nobody would know the difference. And that's coming, that a lot of what's going to be out there is not going to have the writer, it's just going to be generated. Right now, the artificial intelligence program can record 5 minutes of my speech. I could be talking yell, you know, whatever emotion is, it doesn't matter. After recording 5 minutes of my speech, they can use that as a building block to have me say anything they want, and you cannot tell it's not me. They can use that 5-minute frame of my speech to now build me into saying anything they want me to say. And I could say some pretty wild off the cuff stuff, and it would sound just like I was saying it. And even then, and even now, those fake speeches can be accompanied now with fake. They can do the same thing. Video will be up here. They can take that video and rebuild it so that they actually have me on video saying it. And like I said, this technology is still in its infancy. Right now, they have programs that can identify the fake from the real. But it's going to get where, unless you got a lot of money for a really sophisticated program, you're not going to be able to tell which is fake and real. And it may even get to the point that some of those sophisticated programs may have trouble telling which is real and which isn't. But this is the age that we live in. But our hope is not in this world. And we know that these things will come. It says in Daniel 12:9, he said, "Go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the end of time." And then in verse 10, he says, "Many shall be purified, made white, and refined, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand." We can have understanding of the time and age that we live in. Now, I like what it says in verse 13. "But you, Daniel, go your way till the end, and you shall rest, and will arise to your inheritance at the end of the days." Now remember, we started off this chapter by saying, "And the multitudes that sleep in the dust shall awake." I have a hope of awaking to an eternal inheritance. This world's upside down and backwards, but I'm going to awake to an eternal hope. Arise to your inheritance. You know that there are people who believe in what we call soul rest, that you sleep until the resurrection. And they may take this, it says you will rest and arise to your inheritance. Well, I will just point out a couple things. When the thief died on the cross with Jesus, Jesus said, "Today," as in this day right now, "you're going to be with me in paradise." Paul put it like this. He says, "To be absent from the body is to be absent from the Lord." I mean, To be in the body is to be absent from the Lord. To be absent from the body is to be with the Lord. And he said, I would really like to go be with the Lord right now, but I need to hang around for your benefit. As far as I'm concerned, I'm tired of this place. I want out. But for your sake, I'm going to hang around till God's ready for me. But the point is we're going to be with the Lord, but in the day of the resurrection, when the dust shall sing, when this old man shall wake up from this physical sleep, I'm going to then come into the fullness of my inheritance, to my place in God's eternal kingdom. And we'll close with Job 19:1. Then Job answered and said, how long will you torment my soul and break me in pieces with your words? These 10 times you've reproached me. You are not ashamed that you've wronged me. And if I indeed have erred, my error remains with me. Now, this is Job's comforters when Job got in trouble. His life turned upside down. And I just spoke about this a week or two ago. How that Job, from literally the ash heap of everything that counted in his life, worshiped God anyway. That just still blows my mind. How that Job, literally, his family, all of his possessions, everything that mattered, everything and everyone that mattered to him, is sitting on the ruin of his life, yet he bowed down and worshiped God and refused to blame God, to be angry with God. He's a little frustrated sometimes because God didn't give him answers. There's another lesson in Job. Job sought diligently for an answer to why. God never, ever told him why. Even when he restored him, he still didn't tell him why this had happened in his life. Finally, after Job pleaded and begged and wrestled with God for weeks and months and maybe years before he reached that place of restoration, God finally came down in person and talked to him out of a whirlwind, basically, even though he wasn't visibly present, he was present. It was a face-to-face conversation. And Job was saying, God, why? And God's answer to Job was to ask Job 70 questions. It said, Job, if you can answer one of my questions to you, then I'll answer yours. And he asked him questions like, I didn't refresh my memory of the question, but there were questions along these kinds of lines, not this exact question, but questions like this. Questions are, Job, can you tell me how a salmon who leaves this little stream in the backside of Humboldt County can travel around the world in the ocean and come back to that exact same spot to spawn? Can you tell me that, Job? He goes on to ask him 70 questions about how the sovereign God has designed and operates creation, and Job could not answer one question. So God's answer to Job is I'm God, and look at the things I do, and you can't answer one of these questions. My answer to you, Job, is not why, but this. You're going to have to accept that I'm the sovereign God, that my ways are higher than your ways, that you're never going to understand all the reasons that I do things and how I do things or why I do things, but you can trust me and trust me and trust me. I'm not going to tell you why, but I'm going to tell you you can trust the sovereign God. You can lean on me. And Job said, there's one thing I know. I don't know why any of this happens. And if it's my fault, you guys are, for 10 times now, this is the end of this conversations with his friends. He said, for 10 times you've called me a sinner and blamed it all on me. He said, and if it is my fault, it's none of your business. It's between me and God. But in the end, there's one thing I know. Oh, that my words were written. Oh, that they were inscribed in a book. that they were engraved on a rock with an iron pen and led forever. For I know that my Redeemer lives, and he shall stand for me on the earth. And after my skin is destroyed, this I know, that in my flesh I shall see God.
Amen.
In my flesh I shall see God. Because many that sleep in the dust, the multitudes shall awake. I know that in my flesh I shall see God, whom I will see for myself, and my eyes shall behold and not another. How my heart yearns in me. He said, you know what? I'm going to see him for who he is. I'm not going to be seeing a stranger. I'm not going to be looking at it through somebody else's eyes. I'm going to have a personal, in the flesh, encounter with my Redeemer when he stands on this earth. I believe Job has been, buried now, 4,000 or 5,000 years, however long it's been a while. But one day when Christ comes and sets his foot on this earth, Job might be standing right next to it. That's the faithfulness of God. That's the power of God. I would like to believe that Job's going to be the first in line, right next to God and Christ when he comes. He says, how my heart yearns within me. I like what the psalmist David wrote. He says, as for me, I will see your face in righteousness. I shall be satisfied when I awake in your likeness. He said, and in fact, the earlier part of this Psalms talks about how the world embraces all of these criteria of success and the things they feel like will satisfy them. He said, but David said, the only thing that's going to really satisfy me is when I awake in your likeness. And the wrong button here. When I awake, I'll be satisfied when I awake in your likeness. And then closing with Daniel, the verse in Daniel, the 12th chapter, verse 13. But Daniel, go your way till the end, for you shall rest and will arise to your inheritance at the end of the days. One day, we're going to come fully into our inheritance. In the flesh, we're going to stand with God and reap our inheritance. We're going